Hello, I'm Dr. Darryl Cross. I'm a clinical and organisational psychologist as well as a leadership coach, and I'm the principal of Crossways Consulting. People have often asked me about the vocational interest questionnaire that I authored along with Mr. Gary Simcock from Prince Alfred College here in Adelaide in South Australia. The history is fascinating, and let me just share it with you, because being involved in career guidance now for well over 30 plus years, back in the late 80s and mid 80s and around that point, we were using questionnaires that came out of the UK and USA, particularly questionnaires that looked at work interests. In other words, what do you like and what do you dislike? Work interests is really a good place to start in terms of thinking about careers. It's a good place to start for adolescents in year 10, perhaps 11 and 12, but it's also a good place for adults to start thinking about what they like and what they dislike. Anyway, we use these American questionnaires, and I used to do a lot of sessions in schools, and parents would often complain about the terminology of some of these questionnaires, rancher and so forth. And it was in the early 90s, in fact 1992, that I was at a conference with the Australian Association of Careers Counsellors, which is now no longer AACC, but the Career Development Association of Australia. We had a conference in Melbourne, and there were a group of us from Adelaide, generally a few private clinicians, but mostly school counsellors, and we were walking out of a restaurant one night, and someone said, "Why don't we have an Australian questionnaire?" And at that point, they looked at me and I looked at them, and they said, "Come on, Darryl, you can do this." And I said, "Well, I can't really without your help." So we made this informal pact that we would put this together. And from 1992 to 94, we had numerous meetings in my office with lots of wine and cheese and all the rest. And basically the school counsellors that I was dealing with and that were relating to me at that point said that they wanted a questionnaire that related to the job guide. Now, the job guide is a job dictionary, of course, that's given out to every year 10 across Australia, and it's certainly online, but it's a job dictionary. And before that, we virtually had the odd pamphlet in the library on banking and teaching and nursing and the police force and the army, and that was about it. But we've now come up with something called the Job Guide, which is an exceptional resource. So they said, look, we need that as our endpoint. Can we work back from that and organise an interest questionnaire that dovetails exactly into that job guide? So that was our challenge. And we did that with their help over a period of 2 years. And in 1994, we finally produced the first pencil and paper version of what we called the VIQ, or the Vocational Interest Questionnaire. And it was used widely through many schools in Adelaide as well as interstate. Interestingly enough, somewhere around the mid-90s, 96 or so, 95, many competitors went to floppy disks, and from the pencil and paper they went to the floppies. Now, the floppies were rather large, a bit like the old 45 records, about that size, only a lot floppier. And then they went down to the smaller disks, floppy disks. I felt uncomfortable about that, because what I realised is that if these floppy disks didn't work necessarily in the schools, then everyone would be calling me for assistance, and of course I'm not a tech head, quite the opposite, and I felt I couldn't provide the support necessary. So from pencil and paper, many went to floppies, but then I could see the internet looming up, and I decided that I would move from pencil and paper and take the VIQ right across to the internet. And it was an interesting journey, because this was now 1998, and I approached a number of organisations here in Adelaide who were high-tech, and I asked them to put this questionnaire onto the internet. Now, interestingly enough, the overall reaction was, we don't know if we can do that. It's never been done before. They couldn't find anywhere internationally where it had been done, and certainly it hadn't been done nationally. but they ventured forth on it, and thankfully in 1998 the VIQ was the first test, and certainly the first career guidance test, to be online. And that's interesting in that it's 14 odd years ago, but it was back then that it went online, and since then we've had numerous improvements as we've gone through. And it is online now and accessed readily, both here as well as overseas, because the VIQ was used quite heavily in early 2000s in Malaysia and has been used in Canada as well. So I thought I'd just like to share that history with you. It's a fascinating history that kind of came about by accident. It fulfilled a need for a number of us back in the early 90s, and now is certainly still fulfilling that need right across the board, not only in schools but in various organisations, corporate and public. So thank you for allowing me to share that history.